This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Our 2017-18 preview of the Southeast Division. It was close as it can possibly be for a couple of teams in that Southeast. A surprising team came out of the fold. Do they have room to mature? And what do we make of this division moving forward? So many questions that has to be asked and can easily be answered. If it were, well, we'd be the masters of our craft. Well, that's exactly the reason why I got the red carpet rolled out for my right-hand man, 50 grand, NBA aficionado, my brother from another mother, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Welcome back, Mr. Shaw. Are you ready to go after we did our rounds doing the Pacific Division?
As always, man, thanks for having me, on our show that's been running now. How long have we been doing this, man? 5 or 6 years already? Season's been flying by, man. But salute to all the fans and listeners of NBA Baseline. Another season, another preview, Southeast Division this time up. Man, it's going to be a great show as always, brother.
Definitely. There's the Southeast Division, Shaw, and we touched on this when we did our previews last year with regards to this division. This is not the type of division that is all snazzy, has got high-profile type players. I feel like this is the grit and grind division a little bit. A few years ago, it was the Southwest Division because, the Memphis Grizzlies repped out of there. But what I mean by a grit and grind division when we talk about this Southeast Division is that there's a lot of blue-collar type players that could actually emerge from the fold and really kind of put themselves on a star platform. And there's also teams here, it's going to take a lot of work. And we may not even just be talking about the roster as much as we're going to be talking about the organizations and what their plan is moving forward. And I think a lot of what we're seeing may be predicated on how these teams perform in this season.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great assessment. I think in terms of star power for this division, there isn't a whole lot of it. I mean, the Washington Wizards probably have the biggest star, in the division within John Wall. And then you can argue how big of a star you think Bradley Beal is. But outside of that, guys like Hassan Whiteside and Dennis Schroeder and Kemba Walker, those aren't household names in the NBA. And no supermax guys, outside of John Wall in this division. So you're right. I do believe it's a little bit of a hustler's division, if you will. But we'll see how these teams matriculate, and we'll see if that's even the case at the end of the season. Because I have a feeling that one or two of these teams might have to make some moves if they're going to try to do anything this NBA season.
Definitely. So once again, we appreciate you and yours for tuning in to the Baseline NBA podcast. As always, get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA is the Twitter handle. My Twitter handle at GameFaceLee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. Download any of the major platforms. We're on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Microsoft TuneIn, Player FM, iHeartRadio, Google Music, Roku channel. You download any of those platforms, allow us to be your go-to resource, getting you ready for this upcoming NBA season. You know how we roll. You know how we do. It's time now to break down the Southeast.
Time to break it down.
Callie Warrenshaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. Time for us to break down the Southeast Division for the 2017-18 NBA season. And as we always do, we start from the teams and their place of finish last season, and we always start from the bottom team up. So let's go ahead and work our way through to the team that finished in 5th place in this division last season, the Orlando Magic, with a 29-53 record, 27th in the league in points per game at 101.1, 20th in the league in rebounds at 43.2, 18th in the league with assists per game at 22.2, and in their defense, 22nd ranked, allowing 107.6 points per game. A lot of changes, Shaw, when it comes to this basketball team off the court, more so than the roster that you see constructed on the court. And I think the biggest caveat that we take from this Orlando Magic is they have never been able to find their way post Dwight Howard. Everybody seems to get this perception that once they let go of the whole Dwight Howard drama, that the drafting of Oladipo and the drafting of Elfrid Payton and the drafting of Aaron Gordon, this this youth movement that we've been talking about with a lot of teams, we thought that they were going to probably get it right. They got past, the flip-flopping and of the head coaching position and getting rid of Jacques Vaughn. They went with Vogel, a veteran guy, knows how to coach these young guys. We thought that maybe a defensive presence would be available to them, but this is not fit out. And now they've gone ahead and said it's time for Rob Hannigan to go, and in comes in the John Hammond, Jeff Weltman era. What does that constitute for this Orlando Magic team, who we've been salivating and waiting for them to turn this thing around?
I mean, it's hard to say immediately. We don't know. We like John Hammond in terms of evaluative talent. I think he's going to try to rebuild this roster very much in the mold of the Milwaukee Bucks, getting young, athletic, long guys who can play basketball. But yeah, this roster it's a little bit uneven and has been so for a little while. So I don't really know what the shape of the franchise is in terms of their fate this upcoming season, how competitive they can really be. It's a bunch of, for lack of a better phrase, no-name guys. And I mean, some guys obviously have been in the league a little while, but they're not household names, if you will. And we don't know if this is going to mesh and that chemistry is actually going to build, under the second year of Frank Vogel, and then a completely new front office in the general management.
If there's a head coach, though, Shaw, that we believe has the ability to take a non-sexy basketball team and make them an attractive basketball team, like she ain't Beyonce, but we can settle for a Cassie. You know what I'm saying? Type of situation. That's Vogel. Vogel takes, guys who really don't look like they mean much of anything, and he coaches these guys up to where they may actually believe that there's a Lance Stevenson in them, where they can do that dance and be all who they think that they really are, and whether or not that makes a significant mark on a basketball team. At least for the window that Vogel is there, they will contribute. That might actually be a good thing for this Orlando Magic team, to your point, which is, again, a motley crew of players who really don't have an identity of where they place themselves or see themselves in a very lost division in the Southeast.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to use all our key buzzwords here, galvanized and motley crew, because this is what they're going to have to do. The roster, like I said, it's just so uneven to me, and it gives me reason for pause. I think there has been maybe some shaking out of the roster a little bit, when they moved Serge Ibaka last year. So that should give Aaron Gordon now the requisite touches that he needs to potentially be effective and maybe take the step that I'm sure they're hoping that he's going to take. Vucevic shouldn't have to be looking over his shoulder in terms of being moved and being on the trading block, at least for this season, at least to begin the year. And those two guys should really be kind of at the forefront of what they try to do. We all know Elfrid Payton is a guy that, for the most part, the old regime wasn't enamored with. It was like they drafted him, and then seemed like they were, his name was in trade rumors maybe a year into him being over there. Now we got to see how they're going to evaluate his talent and his ability to get others involved. Jonathan Isaac, new new rookie coming over from Florida State. What role does he play? Behind guys like Aaron Gordon and even Evan Fournier, on the wing. Does Mario Hezonja finally get some burn out here now? After 2 years, kind of just toiling away on the bench. So again, all these questions that don't really seem to have any direct answers right now. As you said, Vogel is a guy who's hard-nosed. One thing that we do know is that they are going to play defense, but I don't know if they have enough offense to really be competitive in the division.
Callie Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast, our breakdown of the 2017-18 Southeast Division as we preview the Orlando Magic. Let's get specifically into the players, Shaw, because you kind of ran through a few of them, and there's a couple that stand out to me because, I tend to scratch my head about what do you do if you're Vogel when you look at this team and how it's comprised. At one point, Vucevic was supposed to be the marquee player. He's supposed to be the go-to player. They draft Oladipo first round. He's supposed to be groomed to be the go-to player. They draft Elfrid Payton. Then they go with this idea that there's supposed to be this upcoming young, fresh backcourt of Payton and Oladipo. Then they move Oladipo. Then they bring in Terrence Ross, who's been a wayward sixth man who says he deserves to be in the starting rotation, can never crack the rotation, playing under KC with the Toronto Raptors. They draft Aaron Gordon. The guy goes out there and he is like a East Coast poor man's version of Blake Griffin. And then, but the funniest thing out of all of this, Shaw, is everyone keeps talking about Evan Fournier because he averaged 17.2 points per game. And somewhere, somehow, there's this talk that he can only get better. The guy's only 24, but what is it about his game that translate, in your opinion, Shaw, where we should be putting him in that conversation that he should be the go-to person for this Magic basketball team?
Well, I don't buy in that. I think, what he's been able to do for the majority of his career, and especially in his success in Orlando, is that he's consistently be underrated. I think it's, again, I'm going to throw out a lofty name as I often do, and not saying it's the exact same thing, but for many years, DeMar DeRozan was kind of that guy offensively. He's like, he's all right, and then all of a sudden you see him kind of keep taking those strides and those leaps. And Fournier, I think, has been doing that, but he's not superbly athletic like DeRozan is, and he's
not superbly healthy either, Shaw. I mean, he only played 66 games last season, and I don't know what the measurement is, but if you're a basketball team that's only won 29 games and you were there for only 66 of the 82, that's got to mean something, especially if you're considered the most important basketball player on that team. That means, out of 66 games in 82, that basically means that there was 16 games that you weren't accounted for that could have made the difference of whether or not this basketball team could have had more than 30 wins this season.
Yeah, well, here's my thing with Fournier is that I don't know that they want him to be that intricate to what they do. I think it's nice if he's kind of a sneaky surprise, if you will, but you need Aaron Gordon to take that lead. You need Vucevic to be a guy who can really command, the ball on the block a little bit there, shoot that pick and pop jumper, that is very good at. He has a nice little touch out there. Those two guys really need to be the lead guys, where Fournier kind of just playing off of them. And then, he can put up some nice numbers as a result of that. But I don't want them, or I wouldn't want to be the team that's like, all right, Fournier, go out there and just do what you got to do. Here's the ball, rock out. I really feels like he's going to be better off, kind of playing off some of the two guys I just mentioned, and Elfrid Payton kind of getting him the ball in some nice spots. But that said, you mentioned his health. They were able to sign Jonathan Simmons behind him, and I think he's going to be pushing Fournier and Terrence Ross at the wing position for those minutes, because he's a guy who I really do like out of he had burst on the scene as the San Antonio Spurs, found him out of the D-League, brought him up, and he played really well for them. He's going to push both of those guys, and then we even have the old veteran Aaron Aflalo there as well too. But Simmons, Fournier, and Ross get the bulk of the minutes at the wing positions, with Aflalo and Hazonia backing those guys up.
I got to tell you, Shaw, I really do like, if there's something that I've already liked about the Hammond-Weltman combination, is they're looking for some of these guys that have a dynamic element to them that could help Frank Vogel replicate what he tried to do with the Indiana Pacers. I tell you, and I'm hoping this comes to fruition at some point during the season. Don't know how this is going to play out, but I want to see the combination of Gordon and Simmons on the basketball court as part of that starting roster, because I really feel like that's the type of athleticism that they're going to need to be able to compete with some of the better teams. The interchangeability to have your forward play the 2, your power forward to play the 3, even play the 5. That could be a great, formidable defensive front of versatility, locking down points when you struggle to get points.
Yeah, I think that's very plausible. And then even taking that a little bit further, if you will, do they really go out there and give Isaac some real burn this upcoming season? So do you play Gordon at a small ball 5, or leave him at the 4 and leave Isaac, have him come out there and be kind of a small ball 5, and really have a super athletic team? Again, if we're going by what Hammond did in Milwaukee, those are the possibilities that are out there. But they also got Mo Spates out there as well too. They brought him in as a free agent, so he's another veteran guy who obviously can space the floor at that center and power forward position too. So they have some decent pieces that they can work around. It's just that nothing screams to you about this team. Nobody in this roster screams all-star. Nobody screams, all that excitement. Even with Aaron Gordon, being, a dunk contest winner. To me, this is a roster that just has so much that it needs to invest in itself to kind of find an identity. Although, again, we said it already. Defensively, they should be okay because of Vogel's defensive principles team-wise. But really, do they have enough across the board to have good chemistry and make a real run in the Southeast Division?
Shaw, who takes a step forward under Frank Vogel for this upcoming season? Which player do you see has the ability to take that big step forward or really thrive playing under Vogel in the second year?
It has to be Aaron Gordon. There's no excuses for him now that they moved Ibaka out, and so they don't have Gordon playing the small forward position anymore. At least they shouldn't have him playing the small forward position. And now he gets to be his natural, if you will, 5 position where he can be, athletic. He showed a little bit of expansion in his range last season, shoot the 3 at a decent percentage, but then he kind of stopped shooting it. And a lot of that was forced as him trying to be a small forward. But if he doesn't take a step right now, and I wouldn't even want to put numbers or projections on him per se, but he has to be a guy that is like, wow, like he's really improved. Otherwise, this Orlando Magic roster could be, again, same thing, could be very, very different. They could try to blow up some of these young pieces. And I think the name that, again, my dude, Hazonia, not that he's going to take a step this year, but I think his frustration level really may be bubble over. See if they send him down to their D-League affiliate or whatever the case may be, or if they put him on the trade block.
Is Hazonia going to be the one who takes a step backward? Or how about Elfrid Payton? How do you see Elfrid Payton thriving in the second year under Vogel?
I mean, I think he'll be fine. As I said in the outset of this, just hopefully he's, I guess, stable is what the word should be, and confident in his place on this roster, at least to begin the year. Nobody's really pushing him for minutes. I mean, DJ Augustin's there, and he's always nice in a pinch, if you will. Shelvin Max, same thing. Those are career backup guys. It's Peyton's job to go out there and command 28 to 32 minutes a night and really be a pick and roll maestro and get everybody involved. I think Peyton will be just fine. Having the confidence of understanding he should have a safe space on this roster right now. But it is the guys like Aaron Gordon, Hazonia, even to some degree even Jonathan Simmons, who signed a nice deal, who I think Simmons is going to want to see. Okay, I have this deal, I can play. He doesn't want Evan Fournier or Terrence Ross to get in his way. So I really do feel like Ross will probably end up going back to a 6-man position, and Fournier and Simmons will probably be the starters on the wing.
All right. Let's go ahead and do our over-under, Shaw. The Vegas line has it set that the Orlando Magic is expected to 33 and a half wins this upcoming season. You taking the over or under on that?
Under. I'm just,
wow.
Again,
okay.
I'm just not a big fan of the overall conglomerate of this roster and just how it's going to mesh. Again, although I do like Vogel, and I'm not saying they're going to win 15 games or something like that, but, I think, maybe 29, 30 is probably more realistic. So, with these things, over-under, it's always, by a game or two. I don't think they're going to be a team pushing for 35, 36 wins this season. I just don't see it. What about you?
I'm going to go with the over, but probably by 1 win. So it's like barely over. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like just touching over. Like I got maybe like a quarter of my legs still stuck on the other side of the wall, but most of me is still over, right? Like this team, I think, is good enough to maybe get 4 more wins, 4, maybe 5 more wins, simply because of the quality of what may transpire from this division. And if that is the case, it's good enough for us to satisfy the Vegas line. It certainly will not be good enough for us to dictate or rule out anything about the progression of this basketball team. I'm leaning on the idea that Jonathan Simmons could be that much of an important player to Frank Vogel's system that it's going to ascend the ability of them to get wins that they were unable or inept to be able to capture with the roster that they had last season.
I mean, it's possible if everything goes right. Vogel gets some play, great defense, and offensively they find some consistency. Fournier, the guy who continues to shoot the ball well from the outside to open up things for Gordon and Vucevic on the inside, per se. So, yeah, it's plausible. But for me, again, I just don't think they're going to have enough chemistry to begin the year to really make a run, to make a mid-30-ish, if you will, wins total for this NBA season.
All right, well, there you have it. The Orlando Magic finished dead last in the division, third to last in the Eastern Conference. Will they have enough? Will Frank Vogel be able to gather this roster, galvanize, as my man Shaw would say, and have these guys put together a successful enough campaign to bring them out of the cellar for this upcoming season? All eyes will be on the Magic, and the era of the Hammond-Weltman regime begins. Coming up, we will then discuss the Charlotte Hornets. This is a basketball team just a few seasons ago that found themselves in the playoffs. A disappointing season last year. Can they rebound? Can Clifton get the necessary pieces around him to play with Kemba Walker, that phenom out of Charlotte. Keep us locked.
Your to-do list is about to meet its match because Thumbtack connects you with professionals who get stuff done. Looking for a painter? Use Thumbtack. Time for a serious clean? Thumbtack. With Thumbtack, you can hire pros for anything on your list, and we mean anything. Just tell us what you need, and we'll connect you with professionals for free. Compare prices and reviews, then hire the pro that's right for you. It's fast, easy, and always free. Bye-bye, to-do list. Hire skilled pros for absolutely everything. Go to thumbtack.com today.
All right, Kyle Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA Podcast, our 2017-18 preview of the Southeast Division. And up next, we're going to talk about the team that finished second to last in the division, the Charlotte Hornets. A couple seasons ago, this was a playoff team, Shaw. They finished with a 36-46 record, though, this past season, certainly underachieving. They averaged 16th in the league, 104.9 points per game, 16th in the league in rebounds at 43.6, 11th in the league in assists with 23.1, and their defense, they were 13th in the league, 104.7. So this basically was a basketball team that sat around in the middle from a statistical perspective. It's just the fact that they could not figure out a way to get essential wins. Big move in the offseason, one that probably didn't get enough run or get enough discussion simply because of the situation that happened with Chris Paul and, you know, all of the interchangeable parts and the draft and everything. But the fact that the Atlanta Hawks moved Dwight Howard to the Charlotte Hornets team, I think may say something. It should speak volumes about the reset button that the Charlotte Hornets feel like they needed to have with this roster. Now I think it comes down to, can these parts come together and make a move? Can they make a play to get back into the playoffs? How do you see this team moving forward for this upcoming season?
Well, I think a lot of the hype really regarding Dwight Howard coming there was, going under Clifford. Clifford is a guy who trusts him, worked with him before, and really just trying to go out there and really solidify that defense that for Clifford is definitely a point of concern. And they took some slippage last year. They're still in the middle of the ranks, if you will, in pretty much every statistical category. One of the things that stood out for me for Charlotte last year is that they're actually ninth in 3-point attempts. That didn't translate necessarily to the same amount of makes. They were 18th in overall percentage, but the fact that they're shooting the three ball with a lot more consistency now is very interesting. It does make you wonder now with Dwight Howard in the fold, kind of obviously not a stretch five, but with so many threes being taken from the outside, will things open up for him to be more effective on the inside? And I think all that is kind of what, Steve Clifford is trying to parlay Dwight Howard and maybe have a little bit of a resurgence in his career. I do like some of the moves they made, especially with the draft of Malik Monk. I think that's going to be a nice move for them. I think he started the season with an ankle injury, but I think, just getting even more shooting, more guys who can space the floor, that will allow Monk to play the two sometimes and slide Batum to the three position. And again, MKG would end up going on the bench in those situations. But again, you bring MKG back to play defense and all of those things. This is a team that has some nice pieces together. And they've been together for a little while. Not too much turnover. Added MCW as well too. But MCW and Dwight Howard, I think those are acceptable additions to this team for what they're trying to do.
Are you really buying into the fact, Shaw, that Dwight Howard is going to come in, help this team improve defensively? I mean, last season, career low in blocks. So, I don't know if it's about him being a physical presence, as him just being a legitimate big for their style of offense and maybe even their style of defense. But are you buying into the fact that Dwight Howard will make a significant stride in their adjustment to being a better team defensively?
I mean, significant. I mean, that really just depends what that means. If they were in the middle of the pack, 14th, 15th, whatever it was, defensive rating, can they come up to maybe being a top 10? Can you make that type of impact? I think so. I think Dwight is definitely a person who, he's mercurial at best. He rides off emotion. He rides on the trust of his teammates and his coaches. And, he's come out recently and said that his confidence was shot after dealing with Kobe and everybody in LA. And then
his confidence has been shot since Orlando, man. I don't care what he says or what we try to
be going to LA.
Yeah. But no, when I say that, I'm talking about from the minute after they did not win that NBA championship. All right. And you know what? You can blame Kobe for that. The Mamba is responsible for the misery of a lot of superstar athletes in the NBA. But you know what? that's why you have to respect the man's game, because he wasn't out there just to win. He was also out there to make an imprint in the game, which is where we tried to herald Dwight Howard. And so we're so far from that particular point with Dwight Howard, Shaw. And that's the reason why I was a little curious about the fact that the Hornets are really rolling the dice on bringing him in to be Kemba's new Al Jefferson for this run to the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's a whole lot of pressure on Dwight. I don't know that he's even the second option, on this roster. Kemba's number one, and you'd probably say Batum is number two, and then Dwight will, kind of feed and get off that. And for the most part, he played good soldier in Atlanta. It's just the playoffs were a disaster for him. He didn't have a bad season last year.
But he did express the fact that he was not happy about his role playing under Budenholzer.
Well, I mean, yeah, but again, a lot of that had to do with what ended up happening in the playoffs, where he was benched. And he was just like, well, this is Houston all over again, and he was hoping to get away from that. His numbers are, remarkably similar to the almost last year he was in Houston, with a slightly higher field goal percentage, but his minutes were down, and that some of that might even just be a result of some age at this point as well too. But for Dwight, I think it is about him being in the right mindset. And I think if the Charlotte Hornets are able to do that in terms of, listen, you know what, you're our guy, you're going to get some touches here on the block, again, not necessarily just wait your turn, but you're somebody that we believe in, play defense, rebound, Kemba will get you the ball. I think he'll be just fine. And, he had 100 defensive rating last year, again, not terrible, still, pretty good. And I think, again, if his mindset is right, he's somebody who could still be very, very effective, still athletic, even at 31 years old. I think he'll be fine in Charlotte.
If the Charlotte Hornets are to make the NBA playoffs, it will be because of A, Kemba Walker and an MVP-like type of season, or B, the reemergence or the hype machine that follows Nicholas Batum.
I think Kemba is still the obvious key to their success overall. But Batum is just so versatile for them, and does so many things. And again, you can say he's somewhat injury prone as well. But he really is the straw that stirs the drink for Charlotte. So Kemba obviously has to do what Kemba does on a regular basis, but Batum is really, for me, the guy that makes it all work. Even a guy like Marvin Williams too. But one guy we haven't mentioned even thus far, and that's obviously even impacted by Dwight Howard, is Cody Zeller, and even Frank Kaminsky. Both of those guys played pretty well last year. You were worried about them, I think, to begin their career, but they showed some signs, especially towards the latter part of last year. So for me, that's where I'd be like, okay, how much impact or how many minutes does Dwight get, really? Because those guys still need to develop, and they were showing some nice improvement last season.
Well, they were showing nice improvement, but clearly Michael Jordan and Hornets management and Steve Clifford believed that they still needed some meat on that roster. And the flip-flopping between Kaminsky and Zeller, I think you can only do so much. You can only go so far with that. So unless the focus completely shifts on the emergence of, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, who by, every stretch of the imagination really put a stamp on how important he is to this basketball team as well, too. I mean, he's basically like their Kawhi Leonard style type of player without the offense still. The defensive presence that he's building at this and the resume that he's building just makes him also that much more important. I think it lends to the idea that maybe, the Hornets believe that their best days, their best years of them really making a push for the playoffs is by having a legitimate presence in the paint. And they don't know if they can wait around for Kaminsky or Zeller to be able to do that, especially with Kemba Walker being at the status that he's in and the amount of money that they've been shelling out for Nicholas Batum.
Well, like I said, it makes for good conversation, but even more for Clifford to have options. They'll have basically four bigs that they can deploy on a regular basis with Williams, Dwight Howard, Zeller, and Kaminsky. Those guys are all going to get significant minutes and touches on a regular basis, and allows them to play some different lineups out there. But the mainstays are obviously going to be Kemba and Batum, with Malik Monk coming in and filling in some roles as a shooter as well too. MCW, again, I don't think we're going to see too much of him. MKG, as you alluded to, I think he's a little bit more Andre Roberson than he is Kawhi Leonard, but definitely somebody who they rely on defensively to help them. So this team has some options and some different lineups they can play, and that's why I think they'll be, pretty good this upcoming season.
I really feel like it's going to come down to Kemba Walker having an MVP-like type season if we're talking about the Charlotte Hornets making it to the playoffs. And it's not like it's completely a foregone conclusion. I just only feel like he can only be as good and he can only reflect his MVP-like type season display if it's in symbiotic play with that of Dwight Howard. Dwight Howard has to help Kemba Walker be that guy. He averaged 23.2 points per game. He averaged almost 40% from the three. And I think he can significantly take more threes if he wants to, if he has a legitimate threat down low that's going to suck the defenses down there in the post. If Kemba gets at least a little bit of that from Dwight Howard, I feel like he has to be that guy. As much as I want to buy into Nicholas Batum, he is so off and on, and this has not been the first time that we've had this conversation with him. So it'll be really intriguing for me to see, what stands out to helping this Charlotte Hornets team be a team that I think is a 42-plus win basketball team. They are an above 500 basketball team, Shaw. They're one of the few teams that have been constructed together and have been together for an extended period of time now, where they should be legitimately discussed as a team that should be making it to the playoffs. Let's go ahead into our over and under. When we talk about this basketball team, Shaw, the Vegas line has them at 42.5 on the wins. Are you taking the over and under on the Charlotte Hornets?
Yeah, I'm going to take the slight over on this as well, too. As you did with the Magic, just eking over the fence, if you will, a scraper home run. I think they get to about 43, 44 wins and definitely are fighting for a playoff spot. Things could go maybe a little bit better for them if their defense really does come together. But I kind of like the team. Some of the reasons you just said, too, just longevity and some chemistry, some acceptable pieces. I think Howard's definitely an acceptable risk to put at the center position. Again, if he's feeling good and playing well, then this team could do pretty well. So you already said you already have them at over 42.5. So any real prediction on them in terms of how many wins they'll get?
I think they'll get somewhere within 44, 45 wins. I think that this is a good basketball team, and I think Kemba Walker is going to take another step forward. If Nicholas Batum can show a level of aggressiveness while he is continuing to evolve with this type of versatility, the guy's 28 now, so we can consider him a very seasoned veteran. And I just think he needs to come in within his own with this basketball team. We gave him a pass because we felt like there was a comfort level and adjustment period for him. But I really believe that this is going to come down to the chemistry between Kemba Walker and Dwight Howard. And if Dwight Howard knows his place and how he can contribute to help this basketball team, I think it's going to enhance the already dynamic play that we have seen from Kemba Walker over the last couple of seasons. He's been slowly putting together the kind of resume that we talk about with people that should be discussed as MVP type of players. He just isn't able to sustain it because he's always been putting it on his shoulders. So it's either going to be this dynamic of Walker and Batum, which I'm not buying in too much, or it's going to be the dynamic of Walker and Howard, which if it's the Howard that I'm hoping is going to be, the Charlotte team is definitely able to get themselves another 3-4 wins above that 41, above 500, and put themselves in contention to be one of those possible playoff teams for this upcoming NBA season. Kyle Lee, Warren Shaw, the Baseline NBA Podcast, our 2017-18 preview of the Southeast Division. Coming up, talking about that team that finished in the middle, although you could have made the argument they would have been one of the playoff teams for last season. What does Eric Spoelstra and Pat Riley have in store for us for this season? Oh, it gets good when we talk about that Miami Heat here on the Baseline NBA Podcast.
So we interrupt this great podcast that you're listening to. My name is Kevin Rayfuse.
I'm Tim Tompkins.
And I'm Justin Kuzart.
And we host the Drive and Dish NBA Podcast.
We cover every team in the league and a bunch of really fun segments like Random NBA Player, Drive and Dougal, and Hot Takes from Reddit.
So when you're done listening to this podcast, give us a search on iTunes or whatever podcast streaming app you're listening on.
We're also at driveanddishpodcast.com. We are the Drive and Dish NBA Podcast.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Kyle Lee, Warren Shaw, the Baseline NBA Podcast, our 2017-18 preview of the Southeast Division. Next up, we talk about that team that finished third in the division, the Miami Heat. Even at a 41-41 record, they finished 21st in the league in points per game at 103.2, 15th in the league at 43.6 in rebounds per game. They finished 22nd with assists per game at 21.2, and their defense, a top 5 defensive team. Can you argue about that assumption when it comes to Eric Spoelstra as the head coach? 102.1 points allowed per game. This is an interesting team, Shaw, because not a lot was really done with this basketball team. This is one of the few basketball teams that they've kept their core. Now, the focus has been what they did pick up in free agency and also who they drafted. Very high on the guy out of Kentucky, Bam Adebayo, and then signing Kelly Olynyk from the Boston Celtics. A lot of people are looking at this Miami Heat team, and if they stay healthy, Shaw, this could be a dangerous basketball team that nobody wants to deal with throughout the course of an 82-game NBA season.
Yeah, great points, I think, all around. Chemistry, the Heat culture, if you will, Eric Spoelstra, the Pat Riley, the Don, all of those things, work in their favor. And the fact that this roster now is, basically entering a second season after kind of really finding themselves at the end of last year. I think a couple of things are true when it comes to the Miami Heat team. They're going to play good defense without a doubt. And they have, for lack of a phrase, a couple cast-offs who are now really just trying to make sure that, they stay around the league and really feel like, they belong, and especially in the case of a guy like James Johnson, and they rewarded him, by giving him another contract. Deion Waiters is another guy, too, that kind of fits that mold. But this is not a team that was nearly as bad as they were to start the season, and they weren't as good as they were to finish the season last year. So they are somewhere in between, that does put them somewhere around, the 500 mark, if you will. Justice Winslow is definitely one of the big keys to this team. We've reading all types of reports that he's been working on his jump shot. It's a thing that you hear every summer, especially for guys who can't shoot. Oh, they've been, shooting 1,000 jump shots a day, and, he looks really good. We'll see if that translates towards the NBA season. But they have a lot of different guys that they can plug into and can give them offense. Goran Dragic, he looked great, I think, in the EuroLeague stuff. This is just a couple weeks ago. Worked out and looks, a little bit more buff. Josh Richardson, hopefully he's healthy this year. Deion Waiters, the same thing. But the guy that they're really going to have to try to figure out, and is his role more of the first half of last season when they were losing, or more is it the second half? And that's Hassan Whiteside, where he was getting slightly less touches because so many other guys were doing so many great things offensively.
I'm kind of like stuck in this, in this alternate universe a little bit here when it comes to this Miami Heat team, Shaw, because this team, Shaw, epitomizes exactly what we said at the very beginning, that there are a bunch of hustlers on this basketball team, right? Like, there's no Amari Hardwick when you look at the numbers. Ain't nothing sexy about the numbers on the players on this roster. But when compiled together, it's almost like they're a cartel. It's almost as if these guys have banded together to just do damage. And that's the worst possible scenario when you're a team that nobody is really giving any credence to. There's wins that could be had simply because this team collectively just knows how to play solid team basketball, and the components seem to mesh. Remember, we question guys like Goran Dragic. We've questioned guys like Justice Winslow. And under Spoelstra, somehow Spoelstra has that magic touch. He gets and maximizes what these guys bring to the table. So nobody here is going to be on any of the highlights for this upcoming All-Star weekend, right? With maybe the exception of Hassan Whiteside, because he's the true legitimate big that can get you an easy double-double, and his block shots matters in the grand scheme of things because he's going to be. But this is the type of season, Shaw, where Hassan Whiteside could easily be in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year if he takes that next step forward. Goran Dragic could be in the conversation of one of those type of players that is readily deserved of being in the All-Star because of the numbers that he can compile around the pieces around him. And guys like Kelly Olynyk can actually legitimize what he couldn't do when he was playing in Boston simply because he was never taken seriously enough. He could actually be one of those X-Factor type players in a system that really needs their Chris Bosh if they're expecting to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I think the moves that they made definitely helped this overall roster. And again, there just weren't a lot of them. And I think what they really are hoping and banking on is just health. Keeping guys like Waiters healthy, keeping guys like Winslow healthy, to really take, again, a next step as a cohesive unit and a roster. This team was actually, pretty decent at shooting the three last year, or middle of the package, something like that. I think they were 12th. Yeah, 12th in three-point percentage. But they were amazing in terms of defending the three and even allowing teams to shoot the three against them. And in today's NBA, to have that type of perimeter rotation defensively, that will keep you in games, even if you don't have the requisite talent maybe on the offensive side. If your defense really is that good, and then if nothing else, you can shoot the three at a decent percentage, that turns out to be a positive net rating for this team. Where I do worry for them is in their ability to create. Do they have enough guys who can really share the ball and get others involved? Because a guy like Olynyk, he's not dribbling up and creating offense for himself. We know that's kind of the same with Whiteside, and that's where James Johnson comes in and is so key. And that's where even Waiters, when he was healthy the second part of the season, he really started to sup in and do some of that facilitation as well too. So if they continue to move the basketball, obviously stay healthy as well too, Winslow takes that next step. This is a team, like you said, that can be very, very dangerous in the Southeast, and a team that nobody in the Eastern Conference is really going to want to see.
Callie Warren Shaw, the Baseline NBA podcast, discussing the Miami Heat, team that finished in third place last season and basically was in a virtual tie with the Chicago Bulls. Chicago Bulls took the tiebreaker, so they were the ones that wound up making it into the NBA playoffs, although a lot of people could have stood to say, damn, man, I would rather have seen the Miami Heat playing in the NBA playoffs than seeing the Chicago Bulls. But with that being said, Shaw, the Miami Heat makes the playoff if who does what for this basketball team?
I think if Waiters stays healthy and we see the Waiters that was playing at the end of last season, the guy who was getting his teammates involved and scoring and, posing and, having all kinds of gifts and memes, created, out of his antics, if you will. If that's the Waiters that they get this year, and whether he's starting or coming off the bench, I think he can really drive this roster to see some great improvement. It's also going to take, the continued, consistent play of James Johnson. He just really needs to come back and do the exact same thing he did last year. Not saying he needs to be any better than that. If he is great, that's obviously a plus, but he needs to kind of come and do that exact same thing. But to me, the key is Waiters, and obviously Goran Dragic is helped too. What about you? Who do you think the keys are?
I certainly see the ascension of Justice Winslow, 10.9 points per game. I think that he's better than that. I'm not saying that he is going to be a great perimeter player, but I really think that he's the kind of player that I think if he can start showing a level of aggressiveness, similar to what he was doing when he played under, Mike Krzyzewski in playing at Duke, that his capabilities can allow him to get to the free throw line. 2.6 free throw attempts per game for a guy this young and a guy with that much upside. I really feel like if you're not going to shoot the basketball, at least give yourself opportunities getting to the basket, getting to the paint. Goran Dragic, he's the kind of player to me that I think 5.8 assists per game, that's never been Goran Dragic. I think he's always been somewhere around 6, maybe even 7. And he's capable of getting that if he can rely on getting the ball to his shooters. And to your point, Shaw, Eric Spoelstra starts to evolve this system offensively where he can actually facilitate in the way that I think he's capable of being. It's going to take an all-star effort for Goran Dragic for this Miami Heat team to play at a very, very high level. I think that this division is going to force that out of them a little bit because they're right there. They're either good enough that they can be a team that's deserving to be second in this division, or they're the type of team that can struggle against these teams that are still trying to figure themselves out simply because they don't head above shoulders dominate over everyone. Just collectively together, though, because they've been together, they can be soundly better than most of these teams that we talk about in this division and be more effective than most teams that we talk about that's in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, one of the things that I do like about them is that they seem to have a lot of depth. They could very easily go 10 deep.
Up and down the lineup. They've got 2-3 deep in almost every position. I like it. Yeah, excellent point, Shaw.
Yeah, and guys, like you said, that even in that where they can play multiple positions, so Waiters can maybe play the 2 and 3, and then maybe if you're in a pinch can play some 1. Tyler Johnson plays the 1 and 2. Drag the same thing. Wayne Ellington 2 and 3. So again, having that kind of versatility really puts them in the hunt for a lot of things, especially lineups. And Spoelstra's been very, very creative, when it comes to this roster. So as we're running short here, just kind of gonna jump into this over under with Miami Heat. Vegas has them at 43.5, bro. So again, they were a team that won 41 last year. Going over under on 40.5 for the Miami Heat.
I'm going to say over. I think this is a basketball team that is going to give Charlotte a run for its money. It's going to probably even give the Washington Wizards a run for their money. They're going to be right up there again, Shaw, and I don't think that they're going to be denied the opportunity of playing in the playoffs this year. And I think to get into the playoffs, you need at least 42, 43 wins, roughly thereabout, in order to make it. I think the Miami Heat are going to be right there in the thick of it. So I'm taking the over on the 43.5.
I'll take that. I'll sip that Kool-Aid a little bit, and I'm gonna take just giving them a half. I'll give them the 44 wins. I do like Spoelstra as a coach. I think he did have his toughest coaching job last year, and he acquitted himself extremely well. And again, just based on some of the things that we've been talking about through our preview, having chemistry, having some familiarity, if you will, too, and then buying into what the overall Heat culture is, I think this is going to be nice for them. And even adding a guy like Olynyk, could really be great for the perimeter. as a guy who can space the floor as a 4 and a 5. An above average rebounder in some cases as well too. So I like the Heat going for 44-ish, 45 wins, and being right there with Charlotte neck and neck in that Southeast.
All right, Cali, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast, our 2017-18 preview of the Southeast Division. Coming up, we talk about the team that finished second best in this division. This has been a basketball team that we've said for years, have they been good enough or have they been overachieving? This season might actually answer all of that, because this could possibly be the last time that we talk about the Atlanta Hawks as a significant threat in the Southeast Division. But maybe Coach Budenholzer might have something to say about it. You're tuned to The Baseline. Kyle Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Look, I want to go to the game with you, but I don't have any time to be chasing down tickets.
I got you covered, bro.
Nobody can cover me.
I meant Vivid Seats has us covered. Look, it's crazy easy to find the seat you want, and the tickets are guaranteed. Check it. You can even see a view from your seat. We'll make sure you got a wide open look at the field.
Charles, I'm always open.
Millions of tickets, 100% buyer guarantee.
Now, how you want to pay me for these tickets?
Straight cash, homie.
Find your seats at Vivid Seats.
Yes, sir. We are back. Cali, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast, the 2017-18 preview of the Southeast Division. And right now, we are going to bring in the discussion of the Atlanta Hawks. The Atlanta Hawks finished second last season with a 43-39 record. They finished 22nd in the league, points per game at 103.2. Rebounds, they were 9th at 44.3 points per game. Assists per game, 10th in the league at 23.6. And defensively, they were 10th best at 104 points per game. This is definitely not going to be the same Atlanta Hawks team that we just talked about statistically, where they were, where they wound up, making it into the playoffs last season. I mean, you basically can just roll out the scroll on the amount of players that this team has lost. Millsap, gone. Howard, gone. Cephalosha, gone. Hardaway, gone. Calderon, gone. Ryan Kedley, who probably didn't even play that much, gone. I mean, this is a completely different team, Shaw, and probably more so the fact that they had to go in and get in, change up, restructure the organization a little bit. Clearly, there's only two things that are ironclad about this basketball team. That Dennis Schroeder is from Germany and Eric Budenholzer is still the head coach. Other than that, everything else is a toss-up when we talk about this Atlanta Hawks team, bro.
Yeah, you can throw everything away from last season and anything that you know about the Atlanta Hawks in previous seasons.
Yes, we will not be previewing this team off of what they showed us last year to determine what they might be able to do this year.
Other than the fact that Coach Bud is a good coach and, a guy that usually gets the most out of his roster. He gets the most juice for his squeeze, if you will. This is a team that has taken a serious step back in regression, and I guess purposely so that they can, build through the draft and try to get better. I think that spells great things for Dennis Schroeder, who's, should be projecting to be a 20-plus point per game guy this year, maybe 6-7 assists. Quintessential good player on a bad team, or a decent player puts up good numbers on a bad team, depending on your feeling on Schroeder. Bazemore, still going out there doing the Baze gaze and doing his thing on the wing. But I think the keys for me, the guys that I really want to watch, are some of the younger guys, and Taurean Prince and DeAndre Bembry. What types of touches and looks do they get? How many minutes do they get now in this overall development? Because I think they really are going to be at least the immediate future for this team until they get some better talent through the draft. Dwayne Dedman should be nice too. Finally getting a starting role. And being kind of an energy guy and rebounder at the center position. But for me, it's all about Schroeder and Bazley. But I'm really more interested in what Prince and Bembry do as second and third year.
I honestly thought, Shaw, that you were going to say it's all about Schroeder and Ilyasova. I mean, because look, man, I will say this much: Budenholzer will have plenty of opportunity and time to flaunt and taunt Dennis Schroeder and the Bays gays, because that's probably the only thing that's going to keep fans in the seats when watching this basketball team. This is going to be a project at work, man. It's seriously. I don't even know where to begin. I know that Dennis Schroeder is the type of basketball player that there's going to be so much room, to your point, that he's going to be able to flourish offensively. He gave you 17.9 points per game and had 6.3 assists. My question is going to be those assist totals. They probably will stay stagnant. I don't know if they'll increase that much, because you're telling me that guys like Taurean Prince and Dwayne Dedmon and Ersan Ilyasova is going to put Schroeder in the best possible position where he could possibly be getting 7, possibly 8 assists per game. I'm really looking at this backcourt combination of Schroeder and Bazemore. I mean, because for them to even get even 20 wins this season, Bazemore is going to have to basically shoot the basketball lights out to compensate for what this basketball team is going to suffer, which is perimeter shooting. This is not a good basketball team that's going to get opportunities to shoot the ball at will. Maybe under Budenholzer, he's going to find them opportunities. Somebody's going to have to step up out there and really make Dennis Schroeder look good. It'll be interesting to see how this plays. I know they got Marco Bellinelli, but you're basically telling me that Marco Bellinelli is going to have to be averaging like 34 minutes per game to be shooting that basketball lights out, because this Hawks team is going to be suffering to shoot the basketball.
Yeah, they're going to suffer shooting the basketball. They're going to suffer rebounding the basketball, and they're going to suffer passing the basketball. There's not a lot of great playmakers on here. And again,
we don't talk too much, Shaw. We don't talk too much about third world nations in the NBA, but the Atlanta Hawks could very well be a third world NBA team when it's all said and done.
Purposely so. I think they're trying to tank and make sure that they are put themselves in a great position, in the draft, if you will. But you look at Schroeder, depending on how you feel about him as a passer, and that's when he had guys like Millsap and Howard, and even in his early years, the Joe Johnsons of the world, even going back, when he had those guys to kind of pass the ball to, Ilyasova, he can spot up and he can knock down a shot. But outside of that, it's really going to be really tough, and he's going to have to create and manufacture a lot of offense for the rest of these guys on this roster. And I don't know that he's capable. I mean, I just don't see it with him. Like I said, I think he's going to put up decent numbers, may even scrape all-star conversation because of the numbers he puts up. But I think it's going to obviously come down to winning and things for him to make an all-star team, and they're not going to win. So for me, this is a team that's definitely looking and is going to be up against it for the majority of the NBA season.
So I'm looking at a couple of guys that are on this team, Shaw, and I'm just curious, who has an opportunity to really shine outside of Dennis Schroeder and, whatever we might make of, Kent Bazemore and whether or not he takes that next step. I'm looking at guys like Mike Muscala and maybe Miles Plumlee. Can either of those guys kind of crack the code a little bit on the perception of what their roles have been with basketball teams so far in their career? Like a guy like Mike Muscala, I really feel like I kind of like his game. And he's somebody where this is a great opportunity where he can actually put himself in a position where he can outplay or outshine, or maybe even give Budenholzer some flexibility to move him around in various parts, of the court, from a 3, maybe 4 situation or something. Because you can't tell me that Budenholzer's going to rely on Babbitt and Ilyasova through the course of an 82-game season when you got a young guy like Muscala who, from certain points during even last year, he contributed to help this team get to the playoffs.
Well, this is a lot better than, some of your other random picks that you throw out there.
My randomness,
to kind of
I
go
know.
out there and take a stab. Yeah,
you feel more comfortable about the Scala. Okay.
I like Muscala a little better than I like Isaiah Whitehead from last season. So,
I understand. In other words, you're saying that my Cowspiracy theory has got the best of me a little bit too much with my outlandish thought processes about these players. Okay.
Sometimes here and there, man. But that's what I'm here for.
Now tell me how you really feel. Okay.
We bring it back down a little bit. But no, I think that's an excellent point, though, in terms of looking at a guy like Muscala who very well could challenge. I think, again, he's not slated to be the starter right now. But if Dedmon just doesn't give them enough offensively, maybe he could slide in there and get in that role because he can shoot it. He's a decent rebounder as well, too. Obviously not the rebounder that Dedmon is. But I think he's a guy who, no matter what, is going to have a nice role for them coming off the bench. John Collins, too, out of Wake Forest, so they got. He could play some minutes there at the 4 and 5 position, depending on the lineups that Coach Bud wants to run. But Muscala is definitely a dude coming off the bench that's going to get some decent touches for them, as well as even Malcolm Delaney going all the way back down to the point guard, backing up Schroeder. Those two guys should probably be, 6th and 7th guys. Bellinelli, come off the bench and get some touches too. But I'm really looking at a Muscala, as you alluded to really help this team as best he can, coming off the bench in that 5-man stretch 5 position.
All right, Callie Warren Shaw here of the Baseline NBA podcast, giving you a preview of the Atlanta Hawks. So let's go ahead and do the over-under, Shaw. When we look at this basketball team, I mean, Vegas is not looking at this team very kindly right now. They are putting the Atlanta Hawks at 25.5. Are you taking the over and under on this?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I feel like that's a very good pick. They just, obviously they got to do the half to make you squig a little bit. I'm going to go over and say, same thing, 26, 27 wins. I really like Florian Prince. I even like DeAndre Bembry too. I think he's a guy who could end up being one of the better passers for them if he gets plus minutes on a regular basis. Those guys really take a step this year. I think this is one of those teams that will kind of, as we allude to, galvanize towards the end of the season and maybe sneak together a couple wins here and there and sneak up on some teams. But yeah, they're going to struggle to begin with simply because they're just not going to have an identity. But to me, yeah, I think it's a team that can maybe just scrape over that projected win margin. What about you, bro?
This is tough, man, because I look at this Atlanta Hawks team and I'm struggling to find where they're going to get that many wins. I think that this division will give them opportunity. I just don't know if they're good enough to seize on that opportunity. And we've seen how this plays at times. If you come out slow, from the gate, it's very hard to pick up that momentum until things kind of shape themselves. I think the Wizards are going to be a better basketball team. The Magic just by default are going to be a better basketball team. Doesn't mean that they're going to be significantly better. And the Hornets are certainly going to be a good enough basketball team. They may even steal wins from the Atlanta Hawks because of that. And the Heat are certainly going to be a good basketball team. So I'm going to take the under, but they're going to be at 25 wins. That's the only reason why I'm doing that. I really feel like this is going to be such a hard season for Budenholzer, and I understand the whole tanking concept and stuff. But the problem that I have with this Atlanta Hawks team is that you can't expect to tell me that when critical games have to be won, that they have a go-to guy to go get you those points, to go get you those games. You're going to rely on Schroeder. He's still not good enough of a shooter to do that. And I just think that there may be more blowouts when we talk about the Atlanta Hawks than I think about close games being played. And that to me might be their downfall about picking up a couple of those wins beyond the 25.5 line.
Makes some sense to me. Like I said, this is definitely a push. It could go either way. If you would have told me
a push, just a damn shove. Like it just it's like for real.
Whatever, man. But this is just we can just both agree that this is not a very good basketball team. And that's all we can really say.
The one good thing that we can say is that the Atlanta Hawks finally did something great from an organizational perspective in hiring Travis Schlenk from the Golden State Warriors to be their general manager. And maybe the best thing that we can actually say for the Atlanta Hawks is what they didn't do, which is match the offer that the New York Knicks made to Tim Hardaway Jr. for that 4-year, $71 million deal. That could actually be the MVP move for the Atlanta Hawks in what could possibly be a very, very bad season for them, Shaw.
There you go. Way to look on the bright side, bro. Way to look on the bright side.
Callie Warren Shaw, the Baseline NBA podcast of 2017 preview of the Southeast Division. Coming up, we talk about that team, my team, that sleeper team last season, the Washington Wizards. Are they that damn good? Will they take that next step forward? Is it a question of just them replicating what they did to win the division, or do we demand more from the combination of John Wall and Bradley Beal? We'll talk more about the team that finished first last season here on the Baseline NBA podcast.
Holiday rentals? Search Home to Go Gold Coast from $36, New Zealand from $39, Home to Go Bali from $29. Home to Go, the world's largest holiday rental search engine. Go to Home to Go now and save up to 60%.
Home to Go.
All right. In the immortal words of my man Shaw. Callie Warren Shaw, the Baseline NBA podcast, our 2017-18 preview of the Southeast Division. And the last team that we shall preview is the team that finished first last season, that being the Washington Wizards. 49-33 record, best in the division. They finished 5th in the league at 109.2 points per game. They finished 22nd in rebounds at 42.9, 6th in assists at 23.9 assists per game. And defensively, they were 21st at 107.4 points per game. Shaw, when we talk about this Washington Wizards team, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. When will John Wall step up and push this team to a possible Eastern Conference final? It's not a question of if Bradley Beal can stay healthy, but when Bradley Beal is healthy, can he be that sidekick that John Wall has needed for some time now, that has allowed us to discuss about this Washington Wizards team? Can they do this? If they do this, or when will they do this now, still having the Polish hammer, on this basketball team? There's so many things about this basketball team, but one thing is for certain. They are together. They're in part collectively ready to play. There's really nothing stopping them from being the best team in this division again for this upcoming season, but it's about whether or not they're taking those next steps to be that team, to be in that conversation. Otto Porter Jr., be in that conversation. Markieff Morris, be in that conversation. What are we expecting for this Washington Wizards team for this upcoming season, Shaw?
I think you're expecting a team to continue on an upward path, especially, not necessarily feasting on the Southeast, but they're still the class of this division without a doubt. And they went on a remarkable run towards the middle part of last year, and towards the end of last year, obviously, and giving the Celtics all they could handle in the NBA playoffs after an abysmal start. So I don't think they're going to start that bad again. The only question you have really about this team roster-wise is still their bench. Can they get significant bench production? And then the curious case of Markieff Morris. I think he's going to have some surgery to begin the year. Might miss anything in training camp, maybe the first couple of games. Then he also has a legal thing going on with his brother. I think for aggravated assault or something like that. From back in the days. Before he even got to Washington. When he was still in Phoenix. So all of those things are kind of coming to a head. And that would put them kind of behind the mark a little bit. In terms of the power forward position, it might force Porter to play some stretch 4. That would allow Oubre to play some more 3, or vice versa. They could, I guess, kind of have that go either way. So that's the biggest question mark I think I have for this team. Gortat, just getting older, a little bit of regression there too. So front court depth isn't the greatest for this team, but I do like some of the roster moves they made to at least on paper, to fill the bench. Tim Frazier backing up John Wall. Again, just Tim Frazier is a nice guy, and he's, again, career backup. Just one of his role. And when I say that, I mean nice guy. I mean he's going to fit that role. He's not somebody who, you want to give out there in 30 minutes, but I think if you're giving him 15 to 17 minutes a night, that's solid. And that's good for him. He can be productive. If Jody Meeks can ever stay healthy, hey, he's a nice shooter behind Bradley Beal as well, too. So they have some decent pieces that they added this offseason. Again, it's all going to be about health, and then some of the interesting scenarios that's going on with their front court.
It's so weird because I wasn't completely high on this Washington Wizards team, Shaw, when I made my pick. And I had said that when you have a team that is together, that has played together, that has incrementally, have gotten better. They had a setback a couple seasons ago, but I think when you have some kind of cohesive component and they aired out whatever differences, whatever the issues were, and you basically said, okay, this is a division that can be had, and we're keeping this within the perspective of the division. The Washington Wizards, from a talent perspective, should be the best team in this division. From a talent perspective, you have an all-star, superstar player in John Wall. You have a perennial star in Bradley Beal, as it playing at shooting guard position. And that, as a solidified backcourt, should get you in the conversation of being a top 5 team in the Eastern Conference, which essentially should mean that you should be up there in your own division. To your point, Shaw, it boggles my mind why and how this basketball organization still does not fix certain things that so apparently need to be fixed. It's almost like they're playing this game of teasing you. You know that your front court is suffering. This is not a well-grounded basketball team from a rebounding perspective. You cannot continue to live on the play of Marcin Gortat, okay, and Ian Mahimi. So at some particular point, this has to be addressed. And even if you're trying to rely on Markieff Morris and you're trying to rely on Otto Porter Jr. because they're young pieces and they're, you're seeing upside on them. You mean to tell me that the maturation of Kelly Oubre, a guy who basically took a cheap shot in a critical game in the playoffs last season against the Boston Celtics, is suddenly going to figure things out, and Scott Brooks is going to have to lean on him to be that guy coming off the bench to help facilitate what they were doing when they made the trade to get Bojanovic last season. Again, there are just certain things about this Washington Wizards team that make you feel like they're just good enough to look good in the division, but they'll never be good enough for us to talk about them legitimately as being a team that should always be in the conversation of playing at some point in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Well, let me address, I think the Oubre comment, first. I had a chance to be out in Vegas this summer, as I often get to, and had a chance
because that's your home away from home, Shaw.
It very well could be. You're like Bugsy Siegel right now. I know your grassroots is in Florida. You got, the fam up here in New York, but I see you seeing broader visions in Vegas. That's your thing. If they ever get an NBA team for real and not just summer league, then we might have something to talk about.
You're not getting your Instagram pics, out of Vegas for no reason. I'm just a firm believer of that. We've known each other. We go way back too long. Just so that we're clear.
True indeed. Well, while I was out in Vegas, legendary, I think at this point, even in a short time, pure sweat trainer Drew Hanlon, he's working with Kelly Oubre. He's raving about him. And Hanlon is a guy that NBA guys trust, and he doesn't work with people if they're not going to bust their tail and put in the time. And he's saying Oubre's made some tremendous strides. And if you don't know who Drew Hanlon is, check him out on IG, and you'll see he's worked with some great guys in the NBA and definitely has a nice resume, if you will. If Oubre is taking the next step, if you will, then Washington really could be in decent hands. I think we said on last year's podcast that, for lack of a better phrase, Otto Porter is a guy that Oubre should be kind of mimicking, if you will. You know what I mean? Struggled coming out. Didn't really have all the tools that were necessary to be effective. And as the NBA continues to evolve and change, Porter kind of found his niche and was one of the best 3-point shooters in the league last year. I say that Oubre is going to do that this upcoming season, but just kind of making those small incremental steps and improvements. And they were fine last year, and put him out at a starting position as a stretch four. Again, it can go either way, he or Porter. If those two guys continue on their upward path, Porter just got that nice deal too. I think Washington will be okay. But as you alluded to, yeah, it's tough when you see them really kind of thin at that front court position, and that's why it's going to force Porter and Oubre to play maybe bigger than they're even really capable or should be trying to play. Jason Smith, Mike Scott, Chris McCullough, all those guys are not really there. Yam Mahimi as well too. Again, you just don't get excited about those players. So for me, yeah, it's all going to be about what Wall, Beal, and Otto Porter do in addition to Oubre. And again, of course, if Markieff Morris is there to stay consistent and doesn't have any trouble off the court.
I will say that I do like the pickup of Mike Scott. I think that he was underutilized under Coach Budenholzer in Atlanta. And I think that under Scott Brooks is going to be able to use him, I think, a little bit better. And if you look at this roster and you look at where certain positions are going to have to be filled from a depth perspective, you have a little versatility in Mike Scott. So I like Mike Scott on this basketball team. And I've always been, pretty good about Jason Smith. He's a rugged, tough guy. Oftentimes I think he facilitates in what seems to be lacking with Markieff Morris because he doesn't bring it every single night. And at times he can get lost. And we've seen where Scott Brooks has relied very heavily on Jason Smith to fill in that void from the front court perspective. So my question to you is this, Shaw. In year 2 under Scott Brooks, which player thrives and which player dives?
Yeah, I mean, who knows, bro. I don't know that anybody's going to take a step back per se, and it won't be because of Brooks. If there's anybody that you're pointing to, it would probably be Gortat, simply because the age is catching up to him, and then the modern NBA is kind of phasing him out.
So we're expecting there's a possible, trade,
No, I wouldn't say that, but I think his role in essence may just be diminished. He'll definitely have some nice nights where, maybe some bigger guys are out there and, he's more involved in pick and roll and, dropping the Polish hammer, if you will. But there might be some nights where he starts to be Dwight Howard-ish, if you will, and they're trying to go with a smaller lineup. Again, maybe a Markieff Morris at the 5 or however they say fit, maybe one of these stretchy guys and Smith and Mike Scott as well, too. So that's where I see maybe some regression. I don't know if we're going to see anybody take any massive leaps, offensively, defensively, one way or the other. They need to have some definitely some marked consistency, and health is obviously one of those things too. So for me, the bench is where is going to be the biggest key to them, because I don't question what you're going to get from Wall, Beal, and even Porter and Morris when if he's there. I am a little bit concerned about what Frazier, Meeks, and those guys can do. In a role playing for a playoff bound team, and a team at least in John Wall's mind has some not playoffs, but even finals aspirations, if you will.
All right, so let's go ahead, Shaw, and move ourselves to that added old segment, that over and under. We have the Vegas line with the Washington Wizards giving us 47.5 wins, taking the over or the under on the Washington Wizards.
I'm going to go over, and by a little bit, too. Depending on what you consider a little bit. I'm going to say they're going to get into 50-ish, maybe even 51 wins. I think Wall he found something last year, understanding what he can be in the NBA, and what it takes for him to get his team to that next level. Again, Beal was healthy for the most part last year as well, too. Those two things remain consistent, and sky's the limit really for this team, especially within this division. I think they can get to 50 wins or so. What about you?
I'm taking the over. I think this Washington Wizards team is going to be marketably better. The cohesive factor, I just think it's just so important when you're talking about this division. And I think that they did find something last season, both Beal and Wall. Beal recognizing that if he takes care of himself and maintains, being a part of that lineup, he played 77 games last season, which is phenomenal. Okay. I do think that the one thing that I will be looking for is seeing how this lineup from a depth perspective is going to be able to keep the health of Wall and Beal throughout the course of the season. If they're not getting anything from their backups, I'm not going to be surprised if the Washington Wizards seriously try to go all in, because I just think that they will be head and shoulders better than most of the teams. I think with the exception of the Charlotte Hornets and the Miami Heat, that could probably push this Washington Wizards team, because we know sometimes these guys kind of lull themselves and allow teams to hang around them in a division that they really should outright be better than. This is a serious situation where if the Wizards get off to a very hot start, look to see how Scott Brooks utilizes his roster and whether or not they try to make some mid-season trade deadline type moves to really bolster that depth, the depth that we've been talking about. This team is going to probably be lacking if they expect to make some noise in this upcoming NBA playoffs. All right, Shaw, it's that time for us. You know how we roll, bro. Time for us to list off the order in the division. The team finishing last all the way to the team finishing first. I think it's a foregone conclusion given the Vegas line that we think that the Washington Wizards should be the best team out of this division. But let's line them up 5-1. Who you got?
Yeah, man, I think Vegas has it right. Atlanta will be finished last. Orlando Magic will finish, in fourth place. Charlotte and Miami will be neck and neck, for 2 and 3. But I'll go ahead and slide Charlotte into the 3 slot and Miami for 2, and Washington definitely class of the division by far and away.
Yeah, I have it the same way, Shaw. I think the Atlanta Hawks are going to be bringing up the rear. The Orlando Magic, while they will be a better basketball team, get a couple of wins under their belt, they will not be anywhere near the top 3 teams in this division. And I think that when we're talking about the 2-3, I think it's going to be a pretty tight race between the Miami Heat and the Charlotte Hornets. And I actually have the Charlotte Hornets coming in at 3rd. I think the Miami Heat will, as long as they stay healthy, will take some significant strides. They will certainly be a better basketball team and put themselves in playoff position. And the Washington Wizards, I just think, is going to be the best team overall, which is really saying something, because I actually feel like the Charlotte Hornets may put themselves in a position to make the playoffs. So that will put 3 teams in the Southeast Division again to make the NBA playoffs. I'm sorry, not again, but potentially 3 teams. Last season, it could have happened again for them. So it's interesting, Shaw, how, both the Hornets and the Heat, I really think that that's going to be the part for us to look for when it comes to this division, how these guys are going to compete and whether or not one of them is going to overtake the other in the division.
Yeah, it's very, very tight between those 2 teams specifically. And, you figure one of them is definitely going to get in, and maybe one of them is kind of on the bubble, if you will, just based on some of the other moves that were made in the Eastern Conference. So, I definitely think 2 teams are definitely getting in, Washington, and right now my prediction would obviously be Miami. Charlotte's going to be scrapping and fighting and clawing for that spot. But, there's some teams that regress that made the playoffs last year. Indiana and Chicago are 2 teams for certain in the Central Division. So that really does open up a spot potentially for the Hornets. And both teams who did not make the playoffs last year. So, yeah, you're right. There definitely could be 3 teams in the playoffs from the Southeast.
All right. Well, there you have it. Our preview of the 2017-2018 Southeast Division. Callie Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. Special shout out to the Almighty Ballers Network. Be sure to keep us on lock as we continue to preview the rest of the divisions for this upcoming NBA season. For the Baseline, Callie Warren Shaw. We appreciate you guys, and we'll catch up with you next time.